Could the new Jewish Sanhedrin be the catalyst for global unity, thus uniting the world's religions? Could the new Jewish Sanhedrin provide a forum for a one-world government, thus providing a seat for the coming one-world leader? To answer these questions, we need to first understand the history and foundation of this ancient religious governing council. The formation of the Sanhedrin can be found in the Council of the 70 Elders established by Moses. Numbers chapter 11, verse 16 tells us, "So the Lord said to Moses, Gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tabernacle of meeting, that they may stand there with you." At this point, it is important to note that the term Sanhedrin is not actually a Hebrew word. The name comes from the Greek word synedrion, meaning sitting together. According to the Jewish Virtual Library, it is the final authority on Jewish law, and any scholar who went against its decision was put to death as a rebellious elder. The Sanhedrin was led by a president called the Nasi, literally prince, and a vice president called the Av Bet Din, father of the court. The other 69 sages sat in a semicircle facing the leaders. It's unclear whether the leaders included the high priest. The authority of the Sanhedrin continued through the times of the kings, as we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 19, verse 8. Moreover, in Jerusalem, for the judgment of the Lord and for controversies, Jehoshaphat appointed some of the Levites and priests and some of the chief fathers of Israel when they returned to Jerusalem. There are 22 New Testament references to the councils that were active during the time of the ministry of Jesus. In fact, Jesus was most likely tried by this body of judges. The apostles were brought before them, and the first martyr Stephen was arrested and tried by them. In about AD 30, the great Sanhedrin lost its authority to inflict capital punishment and thus faded on the political stage in Israel. Before AD 70, Rabban Yohan ben Zakkai flees Jerusalem in a coffin, pretending to be dead, and so reaches Vespasian. Upon arriving, he predicted Vespasian would become emperor. When he did, he asked for the Sanhedrin to be allowed to resume in Yavne. Thus the Sanhedrin took refuge by permission of Vespasian in Yavne, where they continued as the counselor of the Jews. This dislocated Sanhedrin operated under the leadership of Rabban Gamaliel II. He was the grandson of Rabban Gamaliel I, who is the one referenced in Acts 22:3, where it is said that he was Paul's teacher, and again in Acts 5:34-40, where he encourages the Sanhedrin to give interfaith tolerance toward the then new Christian church. Following the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, the Sanhedrin fled, moving from site to site until AD 193. Finally, the members made their last move to Tiberias. In AD 358, the Roman Emperor Theodosius disbanded the Sanhedrin and declared it illegal, under pain of execution, to grant ordination to new Sanhedrin members or issue new court rulings. In the closing years of this academic center in Tiberias, the Jerusalem Talmud was compiled. The Talmud is a collection of commentaries on the oral and written traditions of the Jews and is the primary source of Jewish religious law and Jewish theology. A 1961 archaeological dig just south of the present-day city of Tiberias uncovered a basilica structure that, archaeologists believe, may have served as the Sanhedrin seat in Tiberias. During our 2019 base tour to Israel, we noticed that the floor of this 4th century synagogue has the images of the zodiac wheel, featuring, among other pagan images, depictions of naked humans. The wheel encircles a haloed Helios, the Greek sun god, mounted atop his chariot. If this truly was the home of the last formal Sanhedrin in Israel, then it has a sad tale to tell of the influence of pagan ideas embedded within the foundation of the synagogue where the Jerusalem Talmud was compiled. The synagogue at Beth Alpha near Gilboa is another wonderful example of the infiltration of the zodiac wheel into the foundation of Jewish theological thinking. Again, we see the images of Helios, the Greek sun god, mounted atop his chariot. Sepphoris is an archaeological site located in the central Galilee region of Israel, 3.7 miles northwest of Nazareth. Here again, we see the pagan influences laid out on the floor of this synagogue. In Sepphoris, in AD 200, the Rabbi Yehuda Hassasi edited and published the oral law as a canonic text called the Mishnah, meaning secondary. This is the second Torah and can be seen as a Jewish equivalent to the New Testament. The Mishnah was later transferred to Babylon, and there, far from Roman Byzantine Empire, the rabbis wrote the official version of the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. I think it's safe to say that based on these three examples of the Mosaic floor coverings, the 4th century Jewish theologians abandoned their abhorrence of images as prescribed in the Mosaic law, which states, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth." The more mankind accommodates the false representations of God, the more those images find a comfortable home in both heart and mind. Post the exile imposed by the Romans, there have been many attempts to reconvene this governing body of Jewish scholars. Since the dissolution of the Sanhedrin in 358 CE, no universally recognized authority has been established. The 12th century scholar Maimonides discussed the seemingly incompatibility of the essential requirements of Jewish law for a Sanhedrin and the inability to form one due to the loss of Semica, a formal transmission of authority from Moses through the generations. Maimonides, based on a tradition he had in his family and from his teachers, believed that the Sanhedrin will not necessarily be renewed miraculously by the Messiah. He wrote that if the sages of Israel who lived in the land of Israel would gather together and choose one among them as worthy of ordination, then he would be considered to have been ordained with the original ordination. He in turn would ordain 69 or 70 men until the entire Sanhedrin was reconstituted. Based on this simple solution, an agreement of the sages of Israel could choose and ordain a Nasi, who would be responsible to populate the remainder of the 70-seat Sanhedrin. In the last 500 years, there has been a few unsuccessful attempts to reestablish a Sanhedrin. In 1538, in 1830, in 1901, in 1940, and in 1949. Recently, several websites reported that in 2004, on the shores of the Sea of Galilee in Tiberias, a new Sanhedrin was established. Apparently, this organization referred to itself as the Nascent Sanhedrin or Developing Sanhedrin, and regarded itself as a provisional body awaiting integration into the Israeli government as both a Supreme Court and an upper house of the Knesset. Even though the Israeli secular press regards it as an illegitimate fundamentalist organization of rabbis, this group, by consensus, elected Rabbi Moshe Halberstam as the Nasi. Unfortunately, he died shortly afterwards in 2006 at the age of 74. A spokesman said the rebirth of the Sanhedrin is a slow, ongoing process. Although it makes headlines and many like to highlight its controversy, it is, in truth, a humble project by rabbis from all sides of the Torah world joining together simply to fulfill a Torah commandment. Rather than a source of religious division, God forbid, it is a vehicle to bring about Jewish unity and civil justice, to help repair some of the deepest rifts in our society, and to provide an active, exemplary, and unified Torah leadership so lacking in our times. The Jerusalem Post reports an incredibly significant ceremony took place 20 December 2017. The timing of the dedication ceremony was not coincidental. It was held on the 7th night of Hanukkah, which was also Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the lunar month, is called literally the head of the month and not the beginning of the month, because just as the head contains the life force for all limbs, so does the first day of each month represent the spiritual life force for the rest of the month. The Talmud tells us whoever pronounces a blessing over the new moon in its due time welcomes, as it were, the presence of the Shekinah. Israel National News reported immediately following the lighting of the seventh candle of Hanukkah at the Western Wall by Ashkenazi Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, Rabbi Arenstern, and Mr. Eli Groner, Director General of the Prime Minister's Office, a new synagogue was inaugurated in the Western Wall tunnels. The magnificent $50 million synagogue is the result of 12 years of structural support, construction, and archaeological work in which activities were carried out to maintain and preserve the impressive cavern in which it is located in the tunnels. The synagogue is located opposite the Great Stone in the Western Wall tunnels and near the site of the Holy of Holies. This new facility has 71 seats in a semicircle facing a golden ark. Sound familiar? The round gold ark is made up of sculptured metal incorporating the letters of the verses Shema Yisrael, Ana B'Koach, and the Song of Songs scroll with the sculpture of the burning bush. If the summary goal of this new Sanhedrin, as described, is a vehicle to bring about Jewish unity and civil justice, how far will the arms of their doctrinal tolerance expand? Do the Kabbalists have a seat at this distinguished body of Talmudic scholars? Will the ancient sons of Ishmael be reunited with the sons of Isaac? In researching this new synagogue near the Western Wall, my attention was immediately drawn to the Kabbalistic prayer included in the central Torah ark. The Ana B'Koach is hidden within the first 42 letters of the book of Genesis, beginning with the word Bereshit and ending with the word Vavahu. Referred to as the 42-letter name of God, the source of the efficacy of this prayer is indicated to us by where it is revealed in the Bible, at the very beginning, in the story of creation itself. The Kabbalists explain that each time we recite the Ana B'Koach, we return to the time of creation, and each time we meditate on a particular sequence, we return to the original uncorrupted energy that built the world. By performing the Ana B'Koach meditation, we enrich our lives with unadulterated spiritual light and cosmic energy. Israel National News reports another interesting development took place in September 2005, as a council of non-Jewish observers of the 7 laws of Noah have been selected and will be ordained by the re-established Sanhedrin in Jerusalem this January. Noahidism is a monotheistic Jewish religious movement based upon the 7 laws of Noah and their traditional interpretation within Orthodox Judaism. The 7 laws of Noah are: do not worship idols, do not curse God, do not murder, do not commit adultery or sexual immorality, do not steal, do not eat flesh torn from a living animal, establish courts of justice to build upon these laws. According to Jewish law, non-Jews, Gentiles, are not obligated to convert to Judaism, but they are required to observe the 7 laws of Noah to be assured of a place in the world to come, Olam Haba, the final reward of righteousness. The core of Noahide belief revolves around adherence to the 7 Noahide laws as God's original covenant with all mankind, prior to the Abrahamic covenant and the subsequent Mosaic covenant with the Jewish people. Following the Noahide laws includes a complete rejection of the former Christian beliefs, specifically belief in the divinity of Jesus, which constitutes idolatry and is forbidden according to the Jewish interpretation of the first law, do not deny God. It's interesting to note that this new openness to Noahidism means that Muslims are not guilty of idolatry, and therefore they could be included in a wider interpretation of the Abrahamic covenant. Maimonides strongly put forth the view that Muslims were not idolaters. Quote, although Islam is considered heresy because Muslims replace the Torah with the Quran, this did not stop Maimonides from expressing a positive view about Islam or even about Christianity, which he considered to be idolatry. He ruled that although Islam and Christianity are both in error, they still have some value in that they prepare the world eventually to accept the sovereignty of God. To demonstrate the early growth of this ecumenical movement based on the principles of Noahidism, in April 2006, the spiritual leader of the Druze community in Israel, Sheikh Tarif, met with a representative of Chabad Lubavitch, a branch of the Hasidic Judaism, to sign a declaration calling on all non-Jews in Israel to observe the Noahide laws. The mayor of the Galilee city, Shafar Amar, where Muslims, Christians, and Druze community lived side by side, also signed the document. All man-controlled ecumenical efforts are ultimately drawn into the vortex of the lowest common denominator, which naturally diminishes distinction in the interest of unity. Through this view of unity, differences are viewed as destructive. Therefore, any who are outside of the accepted ecumenically defined inner circle are considered dissidents and are marginalized for the overall good of unity. Remember, danger lies where discernment is lost. I would like to point out one more feature of this new synagogue near the Western Wall that I find very provocative. Above the Torah Ark in this new synagogue is a crown made up of the Hebrew Shavita, which states, "I have set the Lord before me at all times," which comes from the first part of Psalm 16, verse 8. Proponents of this meditative chant say that given the fact that the Torah forbids impressing our imaginations with illustrations of the divine, some other method is necessary to perceive divine oneness, because the objective of any given practice is to condition behavior through repetition. The practice of perceiving the world as an expression of divine oneness can begin as soon as one gains consciousness, and this is where the Shavita enters into the morning liturgy. One must forever keep in mind the Creator's omnipresence and that His Shekinah is with you at all times. One must always be joyful, keeping in mind and believing with absolute faith that the Shekinah is with him and guards him. He is bound up with the Creator, and the Creator is bound up with him in all his limbs and faculties. He looks upon the Creator, and the Creator looks upon him. All good things, as well as judgments in the world, are rooted in God, for his affluence and vitality are in everything. Thus I trust but in him, and fear but him. Blessed be he. Each time I visit Israel, I'm increasingly confronted by those who honestly believe that the ultimate role of religion in Israel is to bring about world unity and thereby peace. Many of my Jewish friends now refer to the God of the Bible as the Creator, thus avoiding the snare of using a specific name that might offend the hearer. What if the new synagogue in Jerusalem is the home of the new Sanhedrin? What if the new Sanhedrin supports a Nasi that is seen as a man of peace? What if the Nasi can draw in other monotheistic religions of the world, including Islam and Christianity? What if the new Sanhedrin achieves its goal of bringing world peace by uniting the world's religions? What if this new Nasi convinces the world religious leaders to forego the idea of building a literal Jewish temple on the Temple Mount in lieu of an alternative metaphysical solution? What if this new Nasi introduces the idea that animal sacrifices are no longer necessary? What if this new Nasi produces many miracles that amazes the nations? What if this new Nasi declares before the Sanhedrin that he is God, standing in this holy place? I have one more thought for you to consider. I have been told that this new synagogue is called Shari Tshuva, which literally means gates of return. The word Tshuva is usually translated as repentance, but this translation is not entirely accurate. Tshuva is better translated as return and signifies a return to the original state. Kabbalistically, Tshuva takes on more of a cosmic dynamic. The word Teshuva in Hebrew may be read Teshuhe, literally returning the letter He. The last letter of the Tetragrammaton refers to Malchut, kingdom. Malchut is synonymous with Shekinah, which is how God manifests himself as a sovereign within the creation. No one can know with absolute certainty what the future holds. In the Olivet Discourse, Jesus gave this simple eschatological advice to his disciples. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches has already become tender and put forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the door. The critical thinker, as embodied in the sons of Issachar, will not reach a hasty conclusion on these matters. Further investigation and discovery will redefine and refute the implications suggested by this article. Please feel free to send us your comments at feedback@khouse.org.